Fantasy Philosophers is brought to you by fantasy-info.com.
The Eagles finally parted ways with Donovan McNabb, as this offseason they decided to go with Kevin Kolb as their starting quarterback for the future and have Michael Vick as his backup for this upcoming season. Donovan McNabb, surprisingly though, was traded to the Washington Redskins in division, and that was a big surprise to me. I know Joe Gibbs, the old head coach of the Redskins, a couple different times. He won, I think, 3 championships he helped lead them to. He actually came out publicly here recently in May here, and he said that he was surprised that the Eagles management would do something like that, and I have to definitely agree with him. It just doesn't seem to make sense that you would trade in division. I mean, remember a couple of years ago, the Packers GM, he at all costs, he would not allow Brett Favre to just be released or trade Brett Favre to the Minnesota Vikings because he didn't want him to go to that situation, and we all understand why now, as look at what Brett Favre did with that team, and especially being in division, you do not want to have to do something like that, trading a good quarterback, that was your guy, putting him in that situation in your own division, and they traded him off to the Jets. So as surprising as it was, Donovan McNabb is a Washington Redskin, and he is hooked up with Mike Shanahan and Kyle Shanahan. Remember, Kyle was the offensive coordinator with the Houston Texans. That's Mike Shanahan's young son. So they have a very good offensive, offensive play calling weapon as far as just the know-how and whatnot on the back end for coaching staff. Some of the problems that we're having with Donovan McNabb now as opposed to when he was an Eagle is, for one, he had one of the better offensive lines for pass blocking a year ago. He had some good solid linemen there that they had built in with Jason Peters and others out there on that offensive line. So he's not going to have as solid of an offensive line, that's for sure, because the Washington Redskins are suspect in that area. The second area that we don't know much about is that, with the Eagles, you had a good established receiving core with Deshaun Jackson there. He really broke out big. You had Brent Selleck. He broke out big. And you also had Jeremy Maclin, who was a riser. He made some plays here and there. That with that situation, you saw a lot of guys break out, but they had a good foundation for throwing the ball. Andy Reid really likes to throw the ball first because they're in the West Coast. Now, he's still in the West Coast offense here. I know some people have said that they think the Redskins are going to run the ball a lot. I think they'll run it a decent amount. But if they are starting to get some protection, some good coverage protection, they will start throwing the ball more, I think, as the season moves along. Problems that we're having right now for Donovan, and this is kind of why he's starting to slide down even more so on the boards. I think right now I've got him at, around 10, and he might even slip behind another guy like Kevin Kolb, who's, growing faster here as we're moving along. He's starting to look stronger and stronger when you start looking at the foundation that he has to work with. The problems that I have is that Santana Moss, he's had a knee injury. He is back in OTA, so that's a good sign. But he may get suspended because of HGH use. So that's something that we have to consider there. The other problems that we have with this team is that really Devin Thomas and Malcolm Kelly have not done much in their careers so far. Remember, a couple years ago, they were second-round picks for the Redskins. They were supposed to be the future receiver on this team, and they just really haven't quite put it together yet. Will they put it together now? We'll find out. I'm willing to bet that one of those guys is going to shake out and start showing something this year. And for Donovan McNabb's fantasy value, he better hope that somebody comes out and starts showing something, because Santana Moss is a good little receiver, but he's just not a true number one guy. And he needs that kind of guy to really be a top 10 fantasy quarterback these days, as deep a class as we have for quarterbacks that you can have options to go to. So because of that, but I will say with Donovan McNabb, he does have 2 very nice tight ends in Chris Cooley and Fred Davis. Cooley should be the starter this year. Looks like they're going to be keeping him. I know there was speculation even during the season that they would probably let him go because of, I guess financial reasons or whatever. And Fred Davis had a really nice end of the season, and it established himself as a guy that was ready to take that next step and be a starter. But still, he does have those 2 good tight ends. At the end of the day, it's going to be tough with McNabb. He can always be a little injury prone. I would expect him to throw for over 35, probably 35 to 3,800 yards passing. I think where we may have a big problem here is in the touchdown area. Remember last year he played about, 14 games. He still only had 22 touchdowns passing last year. And for having Deshaun Jackson, for having Brent Selleck and some of these players, that's a bit of a concern. Some leagues out there in fantasy, you get extra inflated points for the distance on touchdowns. I know that me and my dad, We are in a league that gives those type of points out. And so if you're in some weird league like that where you're getting X amount of points for, a 10, 15 points on a touchdown because it's going 50 yards plus, McNabb has added value in that type of a league. I know that's not the norm, but if you get that kind of thing, because he does make the big throws, he's got a great big arm, and so you get extra points for that. So he's the type of guy, in those type of leagues, if you do happen to be in something like that, he's going to have a little bit more added value. But for the standard fantasy leagues that you're going to get 4 to 6 points, it really doesn't matter where you're throwing it from distance-wise. It could be a yard, it could be 80 yards. Sure, you're getting yardage on the yardage, but still, at the end of the day, there's a lot of guys who are going to get around 4,000 yards, maybe even more than him. Right now, he's kind of sliding out of that top 10 quarterbacks to take this season because of the offensive line concerns, because of Santana Moss's pending suspension, and because we just got to start seeing something out of Devin Thomas and Malcolm Kelly. Maybe the team's going to make a play for Terrell Owens. But remember, it's no lock, as good as Donovan and Terrell were together years ago. It's no lock that Terrell's just going to come in and be a star. He didn't do hardly anything with the Buffalo Bills. And granted, that was the Buffalo Bills. They had no offensive line. They had no quarterback to speak of. So it's understandable that Owens did have his struggles there. But it seemed like he may have lost a step as well. So I wouldn't say that instantly guarantees that Donovan's going to have a great season. I think that might move him right back into being maybe the 10th quarterback to take, maybe over a guy like Kolb, maybe over a guy like Cutler. But at the same time, these are things that you have to keep in mind when you're going to take McNabb.
For more fantasy football information, go to fantasy-info.com and sign up for our free e-newsletter. Good luck in your 2010 Fantasy Football League. As an added bonus, the Fantasy Info guys will include their 5 secret tips for success in fantasy.